Welcome to this Hornbill TV special. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Ngullie. The national capital, Delhi, is no stranger to communal violence, even as recent as year 2020. I think you must have read about this. Violence ravaged the state national capital during the protests against the Citizenship Amendment Act. But perhaps for the first time in recent memory for Christians in Delhi, ladies and gentlemen, the Christian community in the national capital were the victims of religious hatred. On Sunday, August 20, a mob disturbed the prayers of members of a church in Delhi's Tahirpur area. You must have heard about this too. The individuals allegedly entered the building and disrupted the prayers and raised slogans about making India a Hindu nation. Elsewhere, a total of 19 churches were fully destroyed and about 89 Christian houses were burned down in the recent violence targeting the Christian community in Pakistan. Attacks on Christians continue across the world, especially in countries such as North Korea and China too, of course, not to forget some of the Middle East countries, ladies and gentlemen. We have today in the studio the General Secretary of the Nagaland Baptist Church Council, Reverend Zelhou Keyho, to explore the various aspects of why minority groups in India continue to come under assault. The emphasis of the conversation that we'll be having with him for now will be on Christians, nationalism, and their social cultural posturing in the context of cultural religious diversity. Further, our conversation with Reverend Keyho is to look for insights for the way forward, how India or any other community that is considered a minority in India can live with both their flows and common goals together. We are really honored to have you here because, like I said earlier, our editor has been really hunting for you. So we insisted we are going to have this conversation one way or the other, and especially in regard to the attacks that our community, the Christian community in Delhi, everywhere across the world, have been facing. So the church has been keeping tabs on this, Reverend. Like how are you conversant in this?
Well, we are also following what is going on,
Right.
especially the attacks and also the persecution on the minorities, especially the Christians.
Right.
And what happened last week in New Delhi, I think, is very unfortunate. And that is just one incident of the many incidents that has been happening since, let's say, close to a decade. And I think I say unfortunate because these things are not heading to a conclusion where people in authority or a religious group will say we have to respect each other. So let's not go about hating each other, hitting each other, destroying each other. But I think we are going to see more and more of these things happening, especially in India when the authorities are dead silent.
Right. So when you say that this kind of attacks will continue to happen in India, especially in the context of Christians, and of course there are other minority religious groups, did you foresee, and I'm trying to put this into context, your February statement? I think the Naga Baptist Church Council issued a statement before the elections saying that the people should vote for parties or candidates that have no communal agenda in this regard. So when you say this kind of attacks will keep on happening, did you mean that the authorities that we have right now will be engaging in this kind of activities?
Well, partly so because for the last 8-9 years,
Right.
we have seen that the authority is, just too silent. That's one reason why people who are engaged in this kind of activities are emboldened.
Right.
And I think when I say these kind of things will continue, unless we break the cycle of hatred, it will happen more and more. We have law and order situation that are not taking care of things that are happening. We say first information, what is called FIR being filed, yet there is no follow-up. And when there is no follow-up, it emboldens those people who are trying to suppress the minorities, religious minorities or social minorities, or even for that matter cultural minorities, ethnic minorities.
Right. So I'll quote the statement that the NBCC issued during the time, Reverend. So this is what the council said. Pray so that our members exercise judiciously their sacred duty to vote in the coming elections for the good of the state by choosing leaders who would listen to people and respond effectively to their anxieties and needs. Now, it's very interesting, Reverend, that you mentioned how the state government how the authorities, whether in the state or in the nation, have not been able to effectively counter this kind of incidents, especially against religious minorities. So you are saying that first information reports have been filed, and you have also taken this to the community for the government to address, but they have not listened. So has there any point of time in the council's agenda to take this issue to the policy level?
We have made a representation not as an MBCC alone, but as a Nagaland Joint Christian Forum.
Right.
And I think we have also made a statement saying that in a Christian majority state like Nagaland,
Right.
our legislators, our policymakers, our politicians should be responsible to their constituent members, be responsible to protect not just only the religious sectors of the people, but also the cultural and social oppression that we are facing. And I think the church, we try our best to remain as the watchdog of the society.
Right.
To be able to even be prophetic in our utterances, because unless we come out strongly, people with power, people with responsibility, we are not going to see a decrease in this kind of things that we are facing at the moment.
Okay. You mentioned that the representatives of the people, that is the government, must be careful to take the concerns of their constituent members. So do you suggest that if there should be any kind of changes in the conversation where the minority groups, whether it's cultural group, whether it's the religious groups, that they should take accountability not at a policy level but at a community level, starting at let's say the church? So is that what you mean?
Yes and no. Yes, in terms of educating our people, sensitizing our people.
Right.
And whatever it is, we have our representative.
Right.
That is to say that our leaders, our politicians, should be able to defend their community.
Okay.
In other words, what is happening outside, talking about persecution. In Nagaland, we have no such cases, no attacks.
Right.
But then what is happening outside of Nagaland is, they are targeting the religious minorities, the social minorities, the ethnic minorities. And I think as responsible leaders, they have also the responsibility to stand and speak on behalf of those people. So we are saying not just only defending your constituent members, but also speak on behalf of those who are voiceless.
Right.
And I think that is the responsibility of the leaders of the Christian majority states like Nagaland.
Oh, okay. So, would I be correct to say that the meaning of your statement is that it's not only the members themselves, but of course the government leadership, they are Christians, at least in Nagaland. So what you mean is our ministers and our MLAs should also have the moral courage to speak not just for the members, but their being Christians, they should be able to have that kind of a spiritual courage to be able to speak and stand for their faith. Is that what they are saying? It's not just the members.
Exactly. Stand up for the faith, and also stand up for people who are oppressed, who have no one to defend them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what you're suggesting is the government has failed in this regard.
I will not exactly say that they have failed, but I think it is our responsibility as church leaders to continue to encourage them to be bold.
Okay. So personally, you can answer it as a citizen, as a member of the Christian community, not as a member of the NBCC. Do you think the government has failed?
I would hope to see more of their
involvement
and courageous stands at time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about all these attacks on the Christian community in the Middle East, in Pakistan, of course, and even closer home in Delhi, we have had this church attacked. So when you put together all these incidents across the world, what are the other ways besides violence that religious minority groups across the world are facing, are suffering, besides the outright violence? In what way do they suffer?
I think one, they suffer because of their faith. Number two would be, there is always an attack of the majority over the minority.
Right.
And when we say the majority over the minority, they are left defenseless.
Right. And I think this is across the world.
Yeah.
Not just in India.
So, social minority, cultural minority, I think this is not just only happening in our region or let's say in our country, but all over. If we look at beyond our country, I think look at Nepal as well,
Right.
Bangladesh,
Yes.
Pakistan,
Closer home
and
in
then
China
go China, and then to the Middle East. The attack is more on a religious affairs.
Right.
It is not so much of one society against over the other, but I think it is one religious group over the other religious group. And in a country like India, Christians, Muslims, and even other religions are minority. So the majority seems to have the upper hand, pushing these minorities to the corner. China as well, Pakistan.
Right.
The case in Pakistan is the Islamic people attacking the Christians, and maybe even for that matter, the Hindu minorities as well. So this strength of majority attacking a minority, I think it is not just only happening in India, but also all over. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you mentioned, Reverend, a little while ago in your statement, how it is not just in the religious aspects of our life as a people and a nation that constantly come under assault. Now you mentioned cultural groups, I believe, and social minority groups. So to balance out the conversation here, don't you think, like besides the one-upmanship that is played by majority religious groups, don't you think, even if there were no such incidences, don't you think we subjugate each other we assault each other in other ways, like socially, in terms of, let's say, appointments based on your tribe, for instance, getting schemes because you're from a particular MLA or minister's constituency, so such kind of injustices prevail. So do you think that even if we have no religious discrimination or hatred, let's say in Nagaland or Northeast, do you think we make each other suffer based on other criteria?
Well, I think what we are talking here would be considered as showing favoritism.
Okay.
And we also have the problem of nepotism.
Right.
And all these are part of corruptions that are happening in our situation. So suffering is not, in our context, suffering is not just only, maybe from a religious point of view, we have no persecution. But then I think there is also an unequal distribution of wealth,
resources,
resources and opportunities.
Right.
And that is perhaps in our context, I think that's where misunderstanding develops. And then one community over the other. We have also seen, the haves and the have-nots. And then all those things are there. Social injustice.
Assuming that, let's say, India is a Christian-dominated nation, do you think that within us we have that same failure, moral failure, to impose our views on people in the country if they were not Christians, and if we were majority in the country? What do you think will happen?
Well, I don't think Christianity Christianity as a religion has ever done that.
Right.
I think Christianity as a religion is a religion of love. It's a religion based on individual commitment.
Even though it has its own flaws. Personally.
Yes. So, we have been, the church has been accused in the nation, saying that there is a forced conversion.
Right.
I don't see that aspect as the problem, or let us say it doesn't hold any water, because.
What is the problem, Reverend? I'm sorry for interrupting you.
When we say that Christians are forcing people to accept Christianity, other religions to come to accept Christianity. So I think this forced religion or forced conversion, I think doesn't make sense. We do good. You can never convert people forcefully, because conversion is a matter of individual decision. Just because people come to the church doesn't mean that the person is converted. Maybe he or she is trying out, and it is our duty to teach about what Christianity is all about. We cannot force anyone.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's something that you decide on your own.
Yes.
And it has no political agenda outside of you. Is that what you meant to say?
That's exactly. Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You brought in the question of conversion here, Reverend, which is very convenient because my next question was based on that. So now you're a leader of a faith that believes in saving souls, bringing as many as you can to the fold of the faith according to the values that is taught in the Bible. So you get more and more people in your faith. So on the flip side of the coin, Reverend, don't you think that this is similar to, let's say, some majority religious groups in India who are also trying to do the same thing? Don't you think it's the same thing, although the methods are very different?
I think it is not the same.
Right. How so?
It is not the same, because we present the gospel. And the basic presentation is, it's not about pleasing you, or it's not about trying to buy your opinions or
Or building a government or country.
but we say believe in what we believe. So I feel that our presentation of our religion is not done by force or through force, but it is just presenting what the Bible says, what our good book says.
Right. So, do you think? Of course, like as a Christian, I think it might be a little easy for us to present our point of view, because we don't know what, let's say, a non-Christian might be thinking if I just tell him about Jesus Christ. I can explain to him about the teachings of Christ and why we are not doing this, why we want to have you in our community as a Christian, and we cannot argue that we are not trying to build a government. We don't want to make India a Christian nation. We don't have such kind of ambitions. How do you make the non-Christian think that that is not the case? Because obviously I think that is happening in India.
Where the church or the Christian community is not concerned about setting up power. That's very clear. We are not trying to raise a soldier that would go against the system, or a group of people that would go against the system.
Right.
So Christianity as a religion is different from a force that is becoming very forceful on the other side, where there is also a political backup. I think persecution or suppression is just a word away. Don't do this, don't do that. Do not attack other community, do not attack other religious group. I think that is just enough. But that kind of thing is not done. But when that kind of thing is not done, we give encouragement, and as I use the word, we embolden people who are trying to suppress the minority religious group.
Right. So, okay, I find that very interesting, because I'm going to connect this question to one of the initial questions that I asked you about whether the state or the national government has failed in protecting the interests of religious minority groups, such as, let's say, the Christians or the Muslims or any other tribal religious groups. So I ask you if the government or the system has failed. So you said no. But now it's very interesting for me that you said that what you need for the authorities to say is just to say, stop attacking each other.
Exactly.
Don't do this to each other. But the government, the authorities are not doing so. So again, do you feel that the system has failed?
Well, if we talk about Nagaland, I think it's a different case, because here there is no persecution as we're talking about. So has the state government failed? I think we cannot label them and say that they have failed. But if we look at the country in general, has the country failed? Has the country leadership failed? Yes, they have failed. They have failed.
So is there any way, let's say, and by what is the current count of churches and church communities that is registered in India, specific to Christians, Reverend? Any idea?
I don't have any statistics about that. But we have, Christian in terms of percentage, they will rate it like 3%, between 3 to 4%.
About 5, if I'm not mistaken. So, okay, comparing to the more than 200 crore, we have a lot of Christians, So there has to be some kind of a representation within the community, even in the political circles, right, Reverend? So, for example, Nagaland, although Nagaland is called a Christian-dominated state, our leaders are Christian, most of them, and even they are aligned with parties that are not necessarily considered Christians. So, do you think there should be some kind of an opportunity, even from states like Mizoram, Nagaland, where we can bring our anxieties and discomfort before the central government?
I think when we talk about a political alliance in the nation, we are not going to see a Christian party in power.
So far, yes, so far.
And I think it will take a very long time. It may not happen during our lifetime.
Most probably.
Yes. So political alliance and then bearing Christian testimonies are two different things. You can have alignment with any political party and yet still be able to maintain your Christian testimony. To be able to say this is right and this is wrong. To be able to stand on behalf of the persecuted Christians in the case of the state leadership, and then speak for those who are oppressed, who are marginalized, over and over again. And I think even if you have a political alignment with any political party, you also have an obligation to voice out on behalf of those who are being persecuted and those who are suffering in the country in general. Yeah.
Right. We'll just talk about some other aspects of the persecution that Christians face. Now, this is a question that I've been wanting to ask you, Reverend. Like, Christians have been persecuted for thousands of years.
That's right.
And it continues. Now, we have talked about this earlier. There are other tribal, social, cultural, religious minority groups across the world that that are suffering persecution in many forms. But this one is specific to religion, and we'll just keep it to Christianity for now.
Sure.
What makes Christianity so attractive for other groups to attack?
Well,
what do you think is the reason?
Christianity is a religion of love, I should say, and it's a religion to be lived. You believe and therefore you act likewise. And I think persecution or Christian persecution is not going to stop. Back then, the church, the Christians were persecuted because of their belief system, because they conducted themselves. And then even now, and even in the future, this will continue. Now, what is happening in our nation is, they think that Christianity is a foreign religion, and I think that is one of the main point why the church is so much under attack. When we say that we Christians are following a religion that comes in, that is imported from outside, the force of persecution become stronger. So that may be one of the reason, one of a very good reason, but just because of that, we cannot expect that the church will die. It will not, and persecution will continue.
What are the ways that we can employ to actually reach out to similarly suffering groups and minorities to be able to have a conversation together to address this peacefully? We
can open up channels of dialogue.
How do we do that?
Religious leaders can come together and then share their opinions, their views. Because persecution happens because they think that a religion is a threat to the other religion. But I think we can open up channels of dialogue and then share our opinions, share our views, share our belief system. Because Christian, I don't think is a threat to any religion. The Hindus will say conversion.
Conversion, yes.
Conversion. Yes, conversion takes place because a person is convinced that this is the religion that they want to follow, but it is not forced upon them.
So when we talk of the force of conversion is the reason why people think that we are going to build a Christian exclusive community or a government in any country which they feel is threatening their social cultural fabric and let's say even customs and practices. So in India, that is, I believe, Reverend, is the cause and the reason that many majority groups use to persecute Christians. But if you look at let's say in Europe, persecution of Christians in Europe, and then in China and the Middle East, I think the reasons are slightly similar.
I will disagree because Christians will never work to establish a Christian power, or even for that matter, a Christian state or a Christian country. I think our agenda, our purpose is to tell what the simple gospel is all about. And the simple gospel is believe in the Lord Jesus Christ and you will be saved. So in other words, that's the good news. And beyond that, I think there is no threat of establishing an earthly monarch or earthly kingdom.
Yeah, I've had conversations about this with my non-Christian friends even in the past too. So basically the whole idea of Christianity is to plan a new system in yourself that is accepting Jesus as your savior, and you live your life like that. Your whole objective is not to build governments or transform the society politically like the way we know.
Exactly.
So how do we make non-Christians see that point of view, for instance? Because if there has to be a resolution, there has to be a conversation of some kind, isn't it, Reverend?
Well, let's look at things from this perspective. Just because I offered you a cup of water when you are thirsty doesn't mean that you have become a Christian because you have accepted that cup of water from a Christian's hand.
Right.
It's just that I saw your needs. You were thirsty, and I sacrificed my bottle of water for you to drink, and continue to do that. And if you see that, you will be able to see the reason why I do. And if you ask me, I would say, doing good is something that I should do. And the interactions, the conversation, the relationship will continue, and then from there I will start just sharing about my faith, why I do the things that I do. But just because you accepted a cup of water from my hand doesn't mean that I can count you and say, and now he has become a Christian. Many of the people, many of the Christians out there in the nations are accused of that. Right. They do good and they think that they are forcing people to follow them.
Right. Okay, I think we have had a very productive conversation. Do you think that whatever is happening in India in regard to the religious communities who are in minority, do you think it's a failure of India's democratic values or is a failure of the system's democratic values? Just briefly, Reverend.
I think it is the failure of the system.
The failure of the system.
Yeah, the failure of the system.
Thank you so much for coming to Hornbill TV, Reverend, and we'll be having more conversations in this regard also.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Yeah.
Sure. We'll be having more of this.
Yeah, thank you.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was Reverend Zelhou Keyho, a leader of the Nagaland Baptist Church Council, having a conversation in regard to why Christian minority groups and also other religious minority groups in India and across the world continue to be persecuted for one reason or the other. We'll be bringing you more conversations in this regard in the future. Keep watching HornbillTV. I'm Ngullie. See you next time, ladies and gentlemen.